When you look back on the concept of heroes and villains, you find figures that are either good or bad, where you then also have the subset of anti-heroes and anti-villains who generally have opposite traits while on the same side of the title that they're meant for being, both bad and good to complete their own means. But finally, you have people who want to be neither overall. There's no real interest in them having to serve the public good or causing villainous chaos to ruin the world. Beings who just instead want to live more of their lives in the middle doing absolutely nothing. Well, probably not nothing, but in terms of having a purpose in a particular story, where they just don't want to be involved being a hero nor a villain. Such examples include Metro Man from Megamind, who delegated the hero work over to Megamind himself when he realized what was best for his life. A false hero who never deserved or even wanted what society put upon him. This was something I greatly thought about over the course of time after the pathetic excuse of Megamind content that was released that frustrated everyone. Where speaking of that frustration was something that caught my attention back to the existence of Metro Man, and the video I made before discussing why Megamind was such a great hero, where I just found out in the past few days that the season of the Megamind rules just ended in June and they had Music Man back to butcher every single ideal further because they do not care about what we think. With a character who stands to represent no great qualities of hero at all, despite doing things that would be considered heroic in the first place. And then, finally discovering that this isn't the path he wants to take in life, doing the most mundane things for someone with his own powers taking a hobby and interest in music. Something we know is very terrible with his own singing and playing, but one he has a deep passion for anyhow compared to his hero work. Where you have to note someone like Metro Man never deserved to be the hero. The perceived one by society was actually more comfortable with being like them as a normal middleman living out his days while others go above and beyond doing a duty that gives life purpose. And the reason I wanted to make a video like this, even though I've already kind of talked about it and covered it in some detail with Megamind himself as the true hero, is that special bridge middleman between good and bad, between Titan and Megamind having the true aspects of characters that are evil and good that people don't really see. Which I still should even talk about how on his own too, with a reminder of good villain that the kids cartoon version of this series forgot greatly, where not many people ever tend to focus on his great impact despite being so powerful that we have become used to. The Superman image that represents all truth and justice, but also twisted into different various villainous forms that become super dangerous to life itself. Where having someone like Metro Man was the breath of fresh air to balance out all the scales in all forms, to translate his duty into one that does not have powers but a brain, and comparing that to giving someone else the same wrong sense of the evil superhero clones. Something that is so interesting in the idea of having so much power yet not using it at all. The concept of learning to choose for yourself even if you might be super talented of any degree. Again, with Megamind himself, life is not defined by who society says them to be. Every big character is always told to use these certain things or do this certain way, but how they all twist that on their head to realize that part on their inside. If you remember the very beginning, you are given a picture of destiny between the young boys from the dying world. That from the very first instance of Megamind was loving parents who wanted him to do great, while Metro Man looked like an arrogant prick of a baby, happy to fulfill anything determined for him. Not a single care in the world even though his entire world died. One who goes on that regular stereotypical Superman path of being raised by a loving family while another unlucky person gets raised in prison, shaped to become what these sides of humanity think is great, good and bad of the side of law. I mean, it's also the fact that Megamind was also destined once again for that nice family with the big house, but how much of an asshole fate was, where Metro Man's smug attitude chose to divert him off course and get the proper enriched way to live, which probably was for the best in Fate's mind if you think about what could have happened had he landed in prison, giving us another Brightburn Homelander situation in the entire world. But there's a great problem at play here. Not one like a bad problem that's a failure of the story, but a failure of the heroic character. In the growing up segment backstory of the characters, they portray Metro Man as the popular kid in class, who is also the bully, whereas Megamind is the weird looking nerd who tries to fit in. That his special abilities is well rewarded by both teacher and students, except for him on the side of the big brain, while they just put unnecessary disdain on Megamind every single day. It's the brilliance of showcasing arrogance for a person who has powers that comes with great responsibility, but not using such responsibility, demonstrating none of that by how he treats his future mortal enemy, contributing to the same growth even when he clearly likes that he could contribute to society in a positive manner. How you can make a perceived hero become a villain in some way without truly realizing it in the exact purpose of the character. Like, what chance does his big brain have against him with all these powers that can defeat him every single time? None, exactly, which makes him all the more scarier since he can just defeat him with ease and have an entire city praise him like a god. This image is what stays with them for years to the present when they unveil such a ceremony later in life. Everything is just so grand and every person is hyped to an extreme absurd degree. Just like the cops shooting their guns in the air like they just don't care and they're drunk as hell, and the parents who willingly let their babies get tossed by Metro Man himself. Like when you see a scene like this, you begin to understand someone who shouldn't be in that position at all. He treats them more as a hobby rather than a duty, even if some of the words out of his mouth come like the regular heroic way we expect after Megamind re-enters the picture. Because do you really think someone is truly worthy of being a hero if they nonchalantly mess around with kids like that, or just hardly even care about helping others, or call them random citizens like he refused to help Megamind to become better in the beginning? Because I wouldn't think so, agreeing with Megamind's earlier narration that he got handed over things on a silver platter while he himself was learning right from wrong in the bad way, switched into a polar opposite instead of being indulged like he was someone trying to be the savior of this earth. The character's true purpose was learning to serve what was best in his life. That there was truly no reason for Metro Man to learn because nobody was willing to let him be more than what he was. When he pauses a bit before someone shouts him out, wondering what the world would be without the people.
And at the end of every day, well, I often ask myself, who would I be without you?
It's a moment that is so brief, yet gives you more understanding about a character when you rewatch such a film to realize the differences between the expectations and determinations. The will to make our own choices to who we are instead of what we're told to be. Just like how most people perceive them to be in funny memes to look like Markiplier or Then What rather than focusing on the big picture. Not to say that this has any relevance to the main point of the scene or the character at all, but how he's never given a chance to set his own story straight, following a formulaic outcome that has been the course of their life for so many years, inside this story or outside in the realm of comics, knowing that of the Superman character. Which is why it's brilliant to have him portrayed in this way to gain more sympathy for the side of the supposed villain, and then the opposite case for the supposed hero. Flip the script, but then flip it even more later in the film. You know, you start to think at this point when Megamind takes over the screens that they are rather good friends than enemies because they've been doing this for so long. This is their life, that's what they're told to be. Bickering like an old couple, knowing the same old routine that's been done time and time again with Roxanne in that very middle. Reminding you of that middle part that separates all characters from the true destiny and what aspect that they are searching for. The point where Metro Man starts to truly think about his life and the decisions he should make moving forward as seen later. One where you have to appreciate how they really knew where the story was headed in its animation that showed the blip when Megamind talked over for a second for a later scene to express Metro Man's true desires. That he's been fulfilling a life that wasn't fulfilling for him, but for them. The people of Metro City who depend on him to defeat the criminals like Megamind on a daily basis, and of course understanding what they have both been through, where each have been taught by a group of people to think this is what we have to do, obligated between two sides of a coin of evil and good without realizing what they really are as people. You take one look at all the people enjoying their life and living it to the fullest, and then you realize that they are more happier than what Metro Man even had, even expressed in his own words later that he wouldn't do this hero gig forever, showcasing what he truly thinks about the role, thinking it's a gig rather than a duty. It doesn't give him meaning as much as most characters you'd expect, having that main purpose in a story from the beginning to the end, that they grow to serve the common good above their own interests, and how we turn to think about his eyes of that own interest. And the only way to solve such a problem, because such reputation in the public is too great, similar to that of a god, is actually to die. Well, more like faking your own death, coming up with a key weakness to a super being like Copper, which is something so stupid yet so brilliant that it catches everyone off guard when it actually does happen, because most heroes so powerful are defeated by the most simplest of things, which, thinking about it being a false weakness and his own super speed abilities amidst other things, really does make him a scary being with immense power, but how he chooses to give all of that up for this sequence for Megamind to take over instead. Things that might seem bad because the city isn't used to that, but you just realize in the entire course of his life, and what I talked before in Megamind being a good hero, is that he knew he never really directed harm anyone. He wouldn't give up such because Megamind isn't a killer. In that way, Metro Man might have understood that Megamind had his own purpose to serve as well, where it was up to himself to find that as such, as he was doing right here for the entire course of events, to discover if he was meant to be the true hero rather than him being a pathetic villain despite the efforts to hold it off and pass it on to an undeserving person like Hal. The movie as a whole likes to remind you that you can't make others a certain way because that inhibits their true growth or affirms of that what they are if left unchecked within a desire. With the three distinct natures of Megamind, Metro Man, and Hal, who on the other hand handed the same skills from Megamind without knowing what that responsibility means. Which again, this story reaffirms that Superman parallel with having Megamind dress as a Marlon Brando parody to become Hal's father in this type of way, to try to teach him to become that same hero to go against them because that's what he believes is at the core value of a hero, but not realizing it's supposed to be him. And something Metroman was never taught himself. Again, reminding you of how the hell did you go from a meaningful perspective of heroes and villains to any of the pathetic excuses of quote-unquote villains in its series like the TV and the sequel. This is the part where you have to discuss if Metroman was truly in the right for doing this, something that many seem to still ponder over the fact for automatically giving all of this up. Giving it up if you think it was the best path for his character to take, or not at all. Up to an audience's interpretation where he himself decides to go down this path known as Music Man. He really just doesn't feel like it's his responsibility or obligation anymore, even though the people like Roxanne represent a truth of how people wanted him to protect the city, that they knew that they needed someone strong because they serve a duty to the world. Relying on him to the fullest while none of them can with the chaos that Titan now holds, but once again reminding us that it's not up to them to determine his own fate, nor rely on any supers like that, but how it's up to everyone else to decide that for them. And more of just a way to say, let people become who they want. The yin and yang situation where if bad exists, so does good. Where just because one person decides to quit, it doesn't mean that others won't be able to be up for the task if they choose to fight their entire life for that meaning. Just like Megamind, despite the inability to have the same powers. Powers do not make the man, it's the will that does. If anything, the new look he made for himself just said it all that he was done and dusted because of how much time had already passed for Megamind to take the city while he grew his hair and beard. That he did not care that chaos would reign or the consequences of people dying because that's just not what he wants anymore. Not that it would be a long period of time since the others look relatively the same since that time passed, but how he chooses to hide himself from the public in this way and feel like he fully re-embraces this music side. He's just really happy to be like this instead of what he was as Metroman, where if you don't want to be a hero, you don't have to be. If you want to fight, then you can go ahead and fight. Don't try to make someone perform a duty that doesn't add value to them. It harms them rather than helps them, which I really commend the movie and the certain moments afterwards when they all lose hope to focus on him to make you question if his decision was right yet again in his own mind. The point where he supposedly returned later in the film to actually finally realize his mistake and defeat Hal, which we know was not true. This is where it confirms to us instead that he was the false hero since he had that chance when Megamind first took over, and already told us that he was done in the middle when they came into Hal's destructive existence. Noticing that in these scenes, his eyes where he supposedly came back were actually green instead of the blue similar to that of Megamind that showed us who was truly in charge, if that wasn't any more obvious by the way he started to speak and revealed by Minion himself. Or Old Chum if you want to go with whoever at Universal thought it was a good idea since they don't want to ruin their preciously pathetic Minions franchise, and how you realize that Megamind was the sole hero who stood up against Hal from the beginning to end and not Metroman, one who didn't want to do so at all and one to realize he needed to, where despite having the same power or will to do at any moment as the disguised version shown, he just does not want to help anyone find that out anymore. It's just up to them, because he already has been doing that for so long without realizing it was best to delegate it to having them find it out by the circumstance. What we choose to be is the most powerful thing above all, more powerful than any set of powers that we are born with or abilities that anyone can find. If you find enjoyment in doing something small that your powers don't cover, then you really have it within your right to pursue that at all costs. And whether you think he was right or wrong, hate him or love him, is all up to you. And how the true fact remained that he didn't deserve nor even wanted to be a hero. He was only there to fulfill a set image that society had placed upon him for certain people, but how we let the curtain unveil that that was a false one when the true version comes in the most unlikely places that was tormented until they were shown the real truth. So when we look back upon movies like this and compare the stupid directions others decided to go, we remind ourselves that they existed for a reason and that not everyone can and not everyone should be a hero, but the ones who choose to do so completely deserve it, and the ones who didn't know damn well where else to find it. And Metroman himself was a character who showed us how to find our own heroes and villains without being anyone of themselves. And I'm all done. Goodbye.